My new book, Awake, Observe, Shape, Transform, is now available on Amazon, along with the 90-day transformation journal. You'll find a link to these things in the episode description. Also, if you'd like to support this work, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers with no locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the site and check out the growing merch store, shirts, tanks, hats, and learn about one-on-one sessions with me by clicking the About button. And don't forget, the YouTube page has the podcast and binaural beats for meditation, rest, and sleep. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today I want to talk to you about one of the most enigmatic, sincere, and polarizing figures in the world of high strangeness, spirituality, and ufology, Whitley Strieber. If you're new to Whitley's work, you might just know him as the communion guy, the one with the big-eyed alien face staring back at you from a book cover that haunted every bookstore shelf in 1987. But Whitley's story isn't just about little gray beans in the night. It's about trauma, transformation, spiritual awakening, and the uncomfortable reality that we do not, by any stretch, fully understand what is happening to us on this planet. And I mean that in the broadest sense. Think about that for a second. There is no clear-cut idea of what this human birth is. We have a lot of ideas, but that's about it. We don't know. Personally, I believe that at least a portion of that answer lies in Whitley's work and the UFO phenomenon at large. So today we're going to walk through his 1987 book, Communion, the profound impact it had on people around the world, the strange events that surrounded it, and the deeply spiritual journey it launched for Whitley himself. We're going to talk about his late wife, Anne, and the role that she played, not just in his life, but in keeping him anchored during a time when reality itself seemed to fray at the edges. We'll explore the government's interest in his case, the strange implant in his ear, and how the entire ordeal, if you can call it that, became a mystical path, one that might not be so different from yours or mine. So, here we go. Whitley Strieber, Communion, Contact, and the Spiritual Side of Abduction. It's become clear to me that people will only hear from me what they are meant to hear. Or you could say what they are able to hear. And me, of all people, should understand that. But there are moments where I'm so confused, where I really get to see that we are all living in separate worlds. And I say that because the topic of Whitley Strieber elicits these responses from people that are quite negative. So I'm prepared to catch a rash and a shit from some of you. But the craziest thing is when I talk about someone like this, and the people that like them still give me a rash and a subsequent shit. So, Whitley. I've listened to hours of Whitley Strieber talking about his story, talking about his wife, talking about the spiritual component to his experience, and all I can say is that I believe this man is sincere. I fully understand why others might not feel that way, but let's be honest, those are typically folks that have not given the world of ufology, the paranormal, or the spiritual world the time that it deserves. They watched Ancient Aliens, listened to some podcasts, a couple of Amazon docs, and that's it. I mean, the truth is that this subject requires a lot of time, and honestly, I believe that I have a unique perspective on this stuff due to my understanding and knowledge of the spiritual topics that are only just now starting to make their way into the UFO community, where some were obsessed with the paranormal, some were obsessed with ufology, and some were obsessed with spirituality and religion. I've always been obsessed with all of it. For example, I've read Communion and the Vishnu Purana, and not just casually, mind you, but deeply into the level of obsession. mainly for the reason that I didn't understand my own life and have always felt a level of urgency around trying to glean some understanding of it. And I say that to tell you that there are connections between the worlds of the paranormal, ufological stuff, and the spiritual that cannot be ignored. And I'll tell you this. If you're attracted to a political or religious paradigm, the future of what happens on this planet with our culture and with humanity when it comes to the truth of our existence is going to be very difficult. We see it already happening with government officials and public figures trying to turn the phenomenon into something that fits their religious understanding. And I say religious and not spiritual for a reason. So please, as 38 Special would say, hold on loosely. And with that, on the night of December 26th, 1985, Whitley Strieber was asleep in his upstate New York cabin when something or someone entered his room. What followed was a series of events that would destroy any notion he had of a fixed, rational, controllable world. He would be taken from his bed, he would be examined, manipulated, and left with fragmented memories of strange beings with large black eyes and bizarre, almost ritualistic procedures. Now, I know you've heard this story before, probably dozens of times, but what makes this one different is the man it happened to. Whitley was a best-selling novelist at the time. He had already written The Wolfen, The Hunger, both of which became successful films. He was, by all accounts, living the kind of normal, secular, literary life that doesn't exactly have room for this shit. There's no room for grays and abduction trauma. And for those of you that are already thinking what I was thinking the first time I learned about Whitley Strieber, rolling your eyes, connecting certain dots, just bear with me, and I'll address it, I promise. Actually, I will say this now. There is a reason that these things happen to what some people would call creative types. Here's a guy writing horror novels that suddenly has this crazy experience. Some say that he was creating content, as the kids say nowadays. And I understand that, but the deeper you go into his story and the more time goes by, it becomes harder and harder to brush off. So when we think of a quote unquote creative person or a person that's engaged in creation, whether it's art, music, literature, cooking, whatever, on any level, whether it's a hobbyist or professional, there was a time where that was considered spiritual. You were connecting with the muse. You were leaving this world for another. You were allowing this spiritual being, the muse, to enter you and create through you. Then gradually we created industry around it and zapped it of all of its spiritual essence. But regardless of that, those engaged in creative endeavors are still engaged with the muse. And I believe that that activity leaves you open for other things. It's like I was saying in the previous episode, when you have something in your consciousness as a possibility, then your mind sees it. Like me in the paranormal or whatever, I believe Christy and I see and experience it as well as others because we don't have that thing that filters it out, as Aldous Huxley would say, when we're when he referred to the brain as a kind of reducing valve. So when it comes to our the subject of the day, Whitley Strieber, something happened that night, and he didn't just brush it off. He chased it. He sat with it. He investigated it from every angle, emotional, intellectual, and he told the truth. At least the truth as he could understand it. He underwent hypnosis. He combed through the event and he began to experience what many experiencers report. And it's not just fear, but a presence, something that touched his life, and that something obviously wasn't done with him, which is kind of weird to think about. So when Communion was released in 1987, it became a phenomenon. And not because people were into aliens and horror novels, but because for the first time, someone had described what countless people had experienced and never dared to say out loud. It wasn't just that he told the story, it was how he told it. He didn't frame it as science fiction. He didn't sensationalize it. He treated it as a deeply human experience. And he was vulnerable. He didn't claim to have answers. He didn't even say with certainty that it was aliens. In fact, much of the book is Whitley wrestling with what in the hell even happened to him. And that made space for everyone else that had had similar experiences. So needless to say, after the book's release, Whitley was inundated with letters, thousands of them from people who had experienced similar encounters. And like him, they had been afraid to speak. They feared being ridiculed, institutionalized, or dismissed as insane. And here was someone saying, you're not alone. You're not crazy. This is happening, and it might be sacred. Let me say that again, because this is where it becomes personally beneficial to us as listeners on the path. Whitley didn't collapse under the weight of his experience. He transmuted it. He spiritualized it. And he invited the rest of us to ask, what if the things we fear the most, loss of control, contact with the unknown, existential vulnerability, they're not punishments, but instead they are invitations. This is a radical idea, especially nowadays in this victim culture. It's the thing I'm constantly telling clients. What has happened to you is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. What happened to Whitley is not his fault. However, what he does with it, how he relates to it, and what he gets out of it is his responsibility. And that it's that eternally annoying question, right? Is it happening to you or is it happening for you? This is what makes Whitley so remarkable. Now, let's talk about what happened around the book itself. This is where things get weirder. During the writing and publication of Communion, Whitley and his family began to experience what's commonly referred to in ufology as high strangeness. We're talking poltergeist-like activity, odd electrical phenomenon, dreams that crossed into waking life, and visitors, both physical and non-physical, appearing in their home. Now, this is actually common when you begin to look at the phenomenon closely, when you start digging deeper into it and begin attempting contact. In the episode about our trip to Casadega, not last week, but actually the first one that I specifically about that trip, titled Spirit Mediums Calling Aliens and the Danville Yurt. I talk about experiences we had with high strangeness the evening and early morning hours before meeting with Reverend Margaret Schmidt. We even had some very interesting things occurring when we got home. Well, in Whitley's story, it isn't just him. Anne, his wife, was experiencing these things too. They both documented it. They lived through it together. Their cabin in upstate New York became a kind of vortex, a hotspot. Witnesses saw lights. Neighbors reported all sorts of weird stuff. There were even strange wounds on Whitley's body. And this brings us to something that sounds completely sci-fi, but deserves to be taken very seriously. After these events, Whitley had a medical examination, and the doctors discovered something very strange. There was an implant in his ear. Not metaphorical, physical. And here's the kicker. When doctors tried to remove it, it moved deeper into his ear, like in his lobe area, like not in the ear canal, but like in the cup. It actively resisted being taken out. And that sounds insane, but there were witnesses, doctors, imaging, and this wasn't a delusion. In fact, there is a video from the doctor's visit that I think Anne was filming it, where the doctor is confused by the fact that it moved away from the instruments. Now, whether this is some kind of tracker or a data collection device or something else entirely, we don't know. Whitley has chosen not to have it removed. And I think that's important. Because he believes that it isn't an invasion, it's a relationship. I know at one point he wanted to get it removed, but Anne wouldn't let him do it. He's even said that the implant may be a kind of tool that enables deeper communication. And that leads us to something that, in my view, is the most important part of Whitley's story. And it is that Whitley has always described these events as terrifying, but he never described them as evil. And that is something that most people don't want to deal with. We want clear categories: good, bad, angels, demons, ETs, government psyops. But Whitley says, no, he says it's something else. These beings, whoever or whatever they are, appear to be teachers. And like the best teachers, they unsettle us. They strip away what we think we know. They remove the scaffolding of identity, of ego, and they say, now, do you still want to know the truth? And Whitley says, yes. Now, I'd like to insert this. Whitley is not the only person that feels this way. Chris Bledsoe, Dr. Stephen Greer also feel this way. However, if you are new to the UFO landscape and to the idea of questioning the government, and I mean this sincerely because COVID woke a lot of people up and got them to start asking questions, I believe that we are currently engaged in the apocalypse, like right now. There is a lifting of the veil in our world, so to speak. It's scary for a lot of folks, and that's just part of it. But I want you to look at how Congress, the media, look at what they are pushing out to be front and center in what people are calling the UFO disclosure movement. It's not Chris Bledsoe. It's not Dr. Stephen Greer. It's not Whitley Strieber. It's not Diana Pasulka. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that this is a calculated tactic or anything like that, but I do believe it speaks to human nature. This is how it's always been. Disregard the mystic because the mystic is scary because, again, the scaffolding goes away. So we look at our government-appointed father figures instead of the mystics. Right? It's always cute to me when people say that we have to refer to the adults in the room, right? They said that in 2019, 2020. We need to get the adults back in the room. I wrote about this in my new book, Awake. As we age, we make these politicians pseudo-parental figures, or at least some of us do. Those that need to be told not to steal, don't do 50 miles an hour on a residential street. Some of us Americans clearly need rules and laws because we are not fit to take care of ourselves. And this is a thing now in modern society. This is why the government has to grow, right? When we were nomads, small tribes, the government didn't need to be a massive behemoth because idiots didn't last that long. They got themselves killed. And I'll give you this example, right? The other morning, I'm on the interstate. It's heavy traffic per usual. And this sleepy dolt next to me was drifting into my lane. He wasn't on his phone. He was looking straight ahead, doing his best, and was still managing to cross over into my lane. Once he was inches from my car, I saw that he wasn't going to snap out of it, and I honked. He rejoined us in this commute and got back in his lane. There wasn't a crash because I was paying attention to him, to myself, to the car behind me and the car in front of me. He escaped injury because everyone around him was alert, taking care of him. Later on in the same commute, a gentleman was darting in and out of slow-moving traffic, nearly hitting all of us. But again, we all tapped our brakes and avoided a wreck. And again, we all did the right thing, allowing this dipshit to zip around. The worst part is that he probably thinks he's an excellent driver when in actuality he's not. But since we all sort of co-signed the psychotic behavior, he thinks that. This is the world. This is just how it is now. Both of these incidences are examples of how things work in modern society. I have a few opinions, and I'm currently tempted, or at least to have an episode where I possibly rant for a few hours like a crazy person. But what was the point? The point is that you got to look at, don't look to the damn government as the fucking leadership on this. Look at who they push out. They don't give you Chris Bledsoe. They don't give you Whitley Strieber. They don't give you Stephen Greer. They give you Louis Elizondo and David Grush and God bless them. I mean, fuck it. But the phenomenon has been around a long time. If they wanted to overthrow our government, invade our airspace and kill her, then it would have happened already. I don't know what that has to do with traffic. Anyway, so Whitley began to meditate. He began to seek communion, not just with them, but with the greater mystery behind all of this. He began to transform. Again, he saw this as an invitation. He didn't just write it off. In later books, especially the key in the New World, he talks more openly about the spiritual aspects of his contact experience. He explores the ideas of death, reincarnation, the soul's journey, and the idea that we are that we're training for something larger, that we're kind of a training space, a gymnasium. He said over and over, this isn't about aliens. This is about us, who we really are, why we're here, and what we've been invited to do. This is huge. And again, many people talk about this in ufology, but they are dismissed by disinformation agents that are out there planted by the CIA to keep our eyes on the national security issues that this stuff that has been here forever somehow poses. This security issue shit just became a thing, kids. They are getting to a point where they have to fess up. And they have to couch the phenomenon in this way in order to keep the machine chugging along, i.e. religion, government, the war machine. It all falls apart with the truth. So, just trying to keep it on the rails. Okay. So let's talk about Anne Strieber. Because I don't think Whitley could have done any of this without her. And like the quote says, behind every successful man, there's a woman who believed in him before he believed in himself. And though we're talking about UFO abduction experience and not building a better mousetrap, the sentiment is there that for men, there is something about the support of a woman that strengthens man's resolve. It allows us to walk a little taller. I know that's been my experience with my wife, Christy. And yes, there are a host of evolutionary psychological reasons for that, but that doesn't diminish it in my eyes. A scientific explanation for it doesn't minimize the importance of that role that a woman plays for a man. So Anne was a writer as well, just like Whitley, and a brilliant mind in her own right. But more than that, she was his partner in every sense. She believed him. She supported him. But she also kept him tethered to the world when the experiences started to pull him further and further out. And what's truly beautiful is that Whitley has said that when Anne passed away in 2015, that she didn't leave. He still hears from her. She still guides him. He believes that their connection was part of a larger agreement, a soul contract, if you will. And he's not alone. Many experiencers talk about these events in terms of family, of lineage, of spiritual partnership that spans across dimensions. And I think that's something that's been lost in our rush to either debunk or to deify contact. These aren't always invasions. Sometimes they're invitations. Sometimes they're agreements. Sometimes they're love stories. This is a very real aspect of all of this. UFO lore is filled with contact stories that are deeply spiritual and filled with love. The problem is that when you put dark, foreboding music under the experiencer's narration, you end up with either a horror movie or something very concerning. And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Look at who's presenting it to you. The government, Hollywood, right? In fact, I'll say this. In light of everything happening in the world right now, every single thing that happens to you on this planet is an invitation. I don't care how bad it is or how dark it is. It's an invitation to grow spiritually. I realize how that sounds, and yes, some of this process is going to be very hard, to say the least. But what other option do you have? To become hardened and calloused? What kind of experience do you think that hardening yourself is going to create for you here on Earth? Heartbreak is built into the code. Loss is part of the deal, so do not let this process go to waste. You have to grow. That is the only option. This is a spiritual plane. This is where the soul grows. This is why you are here. So, let's address the elephant in the room. Was Whitley Strieber ever studied by the government? He has said yes, but indirectly. There were definitely people sniffing around, researchers, scientists, intelligence-linked figures. Some of them made strange offers. Some of them wanted him to submit to more intense study, but Whitley was always cautious. He wanted to tell his story, but he didn't want to be a pawn, and you can't blame him. He knew what happened to others who got too close. And anyway, the more important question is, why would they be interested? Because Whitley's story is not just an abduction story. That's why. It's a consciousness story. His experiences seem to suggest that there's a direct link between altered states, psychic ability, and the phenomenon itself. That's something that many researchers have noted. And that these beings aren't just flying from another planet. They're already here, just outside of our perceptual bandwidth. And some people, like Whitley, are tuned into that frequency. So what you find is that the cases where the experiencer starts to suggest that consciousness is playing a role in the experience and that it's not just some nuts and bolts phenomenon, as they would say, they tend to get a lot of attention from various scientists, researchers, and government spooks. So why does any of this matter? Why do I bother talking about this stuff? Why do I even care? Well, let me put it this way. We all grew up with the idea of miracles, anomalous experiences happening to people who aren't always that remarkable, maybe even deeply flawed. We look through the Bible and we see it. We look through the Vedas, we read about it. We see it in ancient Buddhist literature. Then there's the legends of the Fae folk in the West, the Jinn in the Middle East. It goes on and on. But I think that the farther we moved as a species away from a spiritual connection to some idea of a higher power or a quote unquote other with a capital O, or something outside of the material world, something outside of these 5 faulty senses, we lost a piece of ourselves. And for whatever reason, certain government agencies seem to be very interested in that. But, we forgot what was possible. We allowed the high priests of material reductionism to dampen our imagination as a culture. It's the story of the Ramayana. Hanuman was cursed to forget that he had all these powerful cities or yogic powers until someone reminded him, which was Jambavan, the Bear King. And even Rama forgot his divine origin until he was reminded by Ravana, the demon king of Lanka, the antagonist in the whole Ramayana. God incarnated as Rama in order to fight, defeat, and kill Ravana, the demon king, but then had to be reminded in the end by Ravana that he was God. And that's a very powerful metaphor. God incarnating to defeat evil, but forgetting in the process that he is God, and then having to be reminded of his divine nature by the very evil that he was here to defeat. Right? There's so much there. There's so much to think about. When I read Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, there's a kind of reset that happens. It reminds my mind, my soul, of what's possible. It's filled with these remarkable, anomalous events that if you let go, they will rewire what your mind believes is possible on this 3-dimensional plane. I'd like to read you something. This is titled A Forgetful Beast, and it's one of the pieces in my new book, Awake, and it goes like this. Meditation is an act of political and social rebellion. It is an act of self-liberation, to abide calmly and fearlessly with what is, to liberate the mind from the snare of acculturated thinking, to free yourself from the bear trap of the New Age counterculture. We all fall from one rut into another, clinging to each. No, this is how it is. No, this is how it is right now. Use these methods to access what is yours, to access what is you, the absolute, the stillness. You are the still, soft voice within, and you are the awareness that sits behind it all. The spinning of life, the grasping and clinging, the pushing and pulling are all a perfectly designed snare for a forgetful beast. Now remember. So, what we're seeing in UFO lore is our 20th to 21st century mystical experience. And since we are so captured and brainwashed by the scientific materialist reductionists, the phenomenon has to manifest in a way that culture can understand it. Angels, devas, flying chariots, glowing shields, airships, blimps, flying saucers, tic-tacs, orbs. This is why the experiencers like Whitley Strieber and Chris Bledsoe that related to consciousness or our spiritual origins or even life after death are so interesting to the power structure, to the alphabet organizations and the government spooks. What Whitley's story teaches us is that if we're listening, that contact with the unknown is always transformational, whether that contact comes in the form of loss, mystical experience, psychosis, meditation, or yes, even little gray beings, the message is always the same. You are more than you think you are. The world is more than it appears to be, and you are being asked to evolve. So yeah, Whitley Strieber is still here, still writing, still meditating, still communing, and maybe in his quiet, mystical way, he is still pointing us towards something that we're all a little afraid to see, that we are not alone and we do not die. So go check his books out. He has tons. I love you. Stay awake. Do not go back to sleep. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. And you can do that by checking out Awake and the 90-Day Transformation Journal, both now available on Amazon. The links are in the description. If you want to support this work on a monthly basis, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers that have no locked content yet, just support. You can also swing by the website, check out the merch store, learn more about working with me one-on-one, and as always, the YouTube page has full episodes as well as binaural beats to help you with your practice. So I'll see you next week. Thank you, and I love you.